The front door burst open with such force that the hinges groaned in protest. Roberto, Marina's stepfather, grabbed 2 battered suitcases and hurled them onto the rain-slicked sidewalk. "Get your junk and get out of my sight! This isn't a hotel for tramps who stay out late!" His voice thundered through the neighborhood as Marina stood frozen in the doorway, still clutching the small cake her coworker had given her as a gift. It was her 23rd birthday. Hot tears streamed down her face as he slammed the door so violently that the window glass beside it rattled. Marina picked up the suitcases, loaded them into the trunk of her old car, and spent the night there, curled up in the back seat, sobbing until she had no tears left. What Roberto didn't know was that on that same night, across town, Laura, Marina's mother, was in the hospital being medicated for an anxiety attack. Nurse Camilla, who had known the family for years, discreetly called Marina and told her that Laura had been admitted after a violent argument with Roberto. "Your mother is asking for you," Camilla whispered on the phone. Marina wiped her face, started the car, and drove straight to the hospital, even though it was 3 a.m. In the hospital room, Laura was pale, connected to IV drips. When she saw her daughter, her eyes filled with tears. "He hit me, Marina. For the first time in 10 years, he raised his hand to me, all because I defended you when he said he was going to kick you out." Marina held her mother's trembling hand. It was then that Laura revealed something that would change everything. "The house is in my name. I never transferred it to him, even though he insisted all these years. Something inside me always knew that one day I would need this protection." The two talked until dawn, and Laura made a decision. Meanwhile, Roberto woke up calm, made coffee, and checked his phone. There was a message from the bank stating that his account had insufficient funds. He found it strange since he always kept an emergency reserve. He tried to access the app and froze. Balance, 0. He checked the savings account. 0. The joint account he shared with Laura. Emptied. He called the bank desperately, and the attendant, after checking the data, informed him, "Sir, the account holder made a full transfer of the funds at 6 o'clock this morning. Since the account is hers, and you are only an authorized user, she has the right to make this transaction." Roberto felt his blood run cold. He grabbed his car keys and went straight to the hospital. When he arrived at the room, he found not only Laura, but also Marina, and beside them, the family lawyer, Dr. Henrique, a man in his 60s who had known Laura since before she married Roberto. "What does this mean, Laura?" Roberto demanded answers. Laura, still lying in bed, looked at him with a firmness he had never seen. "It means it's over. You kicked my daughter out of the house on her birthday, assaulted me, and still thought you'd continue living off me. I transferred all the money from the accounts. Dr. Henrique is already preparing the divorce and restraining order." Roberto tried to approach, but the hospital security guard, previously alerted by Dr. Henrique, blocked his path. "You need to leave or we'll call the police," said the guard, a tall man named Jefferson, who had seen many cases like this. Roberto backed away, trying to change tactics. "Laura, you're sick. You're not thinking straight. That girl manipulated you." Marina stepped forward. "Manipulated? Me, who worked, helped with bills, cleaned the house, and still heard your insults every day? You're the one who manipulated my mother for years, making her believe she was worthless without you." Dr. Henrique opened the folder he had in his hands. "Roberto, I have documents here proving that you never contributed to the purchase of the house. Laura paid off the property with the inheritance she received from her parents before meeting you. Additionally, we have witnesses to your constant verbal abuse, including Mrs. Marta, your neighbor, who has already provided us with a written statement. Mrs. Marta was a 70-year-old woman who lived next door and always offered Marina coffee when Roberto humiliated her in the garden. She had kept every date, every shout, every insult in a notebook, waiting for the day when it might be useful." Roberto left the hospital disturbed. He tried to return home, but when he arrived, he found the locks changed. On the door, an emergency eviction notice and restraining order. He pounded on the door, shouted, but nothing helped. The neighbors watched from their windows. His phone rang. It was Julio, his best friend and partner in a small car resale business. "Roberto, Laura just withdrew her name from the partnership and took the investment she had made. Without that money, we'll have to close down." Roberto had never considered that Laura was a partner in the business. She had discreetly invested part of her inheritance years ago when he said he needed capital. He had always assumed that money was his. In the following weeks, Marina and Laura rented a small but cozy apartment. The house was put up for sale at a high price since it was in a valued neighborhood. Roberto tried to challenge the sale in court, but Dr. Henrique presented all the documentation proving he had no rights to the property. Meanwhile, Roberto had to go live with his sister Silvana, who received him coldly. "I always knew you were arrogant, but I never thought you'd be stupid enough to lose everything," she said as he carried the few things he had to the back room of her house. Marina resumed her studies that she had abandoned to work and help with household expenses. Laura, for the first time in years, truly smiled again. She got a job at a library, something she had always dreamed of doing but Roberto never allowed, saying that women's work was taking care of the house. Camila, the nurse, became a great friend to both and frequently visited them for dinner. It was at one of these dinners that Marina met Pedro, Camila's younger brother, a history teacher who had just moved to the area. The sale of the house was completed 6 months later. Laura divided the amount equally with Marina, even though her daughter protested. "You deserve it, my daughter. You suffered as much as I did in that house." With the money, Marina paid off old debts and invested in a professional course. Laura used her share to take a trip she had always dreamed of, visiting museums and art exhibitions in different cities. She discovered a passion for photography during this trip and began documenting everything. Roberto, meanwhile, sank deeper and deeper. The car business closed, he accumulated debts, and started drinking. Julio, the former partner, completely broke off their friendship after discovering that Roberto had embezzled money from the company for personal expenses. Silvana, tired of his complaints and drinking binges, kicked him out after 3 months. Roberto began living in a rented room in a cheap boarding house, working as a night security guard in a parking lot. A year later, on a Saturday afternoon, Marina was in a coffee shop reviewing her college work when Roberto walked in. He was unrecognizable, thin, unshaven, worn clothes. Their eyes met. Roberto hesitated, then walked to her table. "Marina, I need to talk to you." She looked at him without expression. "We have nothing to talk about," he insisted. "I know I made mistakes. I lost everything. I just wanted, I don't know. Maybe you could talk to your mother. Explain that I've changed." Marina slowly closed her notebook. "You didn't lose everything, Roberto. You never had anything that was really yours. And about having changed, you're only sorry because you're living with the consequences. If you were still in the house, with money in the bank, you'd still be the same horrible person." She stood up, paid for her coffee, and left, leaving Roberto alone. 2 years passed. Marina graduated with honors and got an excellent job at a consulting firm. Laura opened a small photography studio that quickly gained local recognition. She had a natural talent for capturing emotions in images. Pedro and Marina got married in a simple and beautiful ceremony with few guests, but filled with love. Laura cried with happiness seeing her daughter walk down the aisle. Roberto never fully recovered. He continued in temporary jobs, living in increasingly worse places. He developed health problems because of alcoholism and stress. Silvana, even having kicked him out, still paid for some medications for him occasionally, more out of pity than affection. Mrs. Marta, the neighbor who had testified against him, ran into him once on the street, and he asked to borrow money. She refused, saying only, "You reaped what you sowed." Marina got pregnant and gave birth to a girl. When she held her daughter in her arms for the first time, with Laura and Pedro by her side, she finally felt that this cycle of pain had ended. There was no bitterness in her heart, only the certainty that she had made the right choices alongside the right people. Laura photographed that moment, the first photo of many of her granddaughter, and kept it in a special album. One day, 3 years after Laura's granddaughter was born, Marina received a call from Silvana. Roberto had died. Cirrhotic liver, complications from drinking. He had no one but his sister at the wake. Silvana called more out of protocol than expecting Marina to go. "I just thought you should know," she said, her voice tired. Marina thanked her for the call, hung up, and continued bathing her daughter. That night, she told Laura. Her mother was silent for a long moment, then simply said, "May he find the peace he never achieved in life." They didn't go to the funeral. Life went on. Laura's studio expanded, and she hired 2 assistants. Marina was promoted to manager at her company. Their daughter grew healthy and happy, surrounded by love and laughter. On the walls of the house, there were photographs by Laura recording every important moment. Birthdays, outings, hugs, smiles. None of them included Roberto. He had become just a shadow of the past, a distant memory of a time when they still didn't know how strong they were. The transformation had been gradual, but undeniable. Marina found herself thinking less and less about those dark days in Roberto's house. Work kept her busy and fulfilled. Her boss, a sharp woman named Gloria, who had built the consulting firm from scratch, saw potential in Marina that she herself hadn't recognized. Gloria had her own story of overcoming an abusive marriage, though she rarely spoke of it. She became an unexpected mentor to Marina, guiding her through complex projects and teaching her to trust her instincts. One afternoon, Marina was presenting a proposal to a major client when she noticed a familiar face in the conference room. It was Daniel, Roberto's nephew, the son of Silvana. He was the client's financial director. Their eyes met briefly, and Marina saw recognition flash across his face, followed by what looked like shame. After the meeting, as people filed out, Daniel approached her. "Marina, I want you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. I knew what my uncle was doing to you and your mother, and I said nothing. I was a coward." Marina studied him for a moment. Daniel had always been quiet during family gatherings, often disappearing into another room when Roberto started his tirades. "You were young," she said finally, "and it wasn't your responsibility to stop him. But I appreciate you saying that." Daniel nodded, relieved. "Your presentation was excellent, by the way. My company would be lucky to work with you." The contract was signed 2 weeks later, one of the biggest Marina had ever landed. Laura's photography studio was thriving in ways she had never imagined. Her specialty had become portraits of women leaving difficult situations, many of them referred by Camilla and other healthcare workers who knew her story. She charged what they could afford, sometimes nothing at all. The walls of her studio were covered with faces of survivors, each one telling a story of strength. A local journalist, a young woman named Beatrice who was writing a series on domestic violence, contacted Laura about featuring her work. The article, when published, brought unexpected attention. Laura received calls from organizations wanting to collaborate, from other photographers wanting to learn her techniques, from women wanting to share their stories. Dr. Henrique called to congratulate her. "You're helping more people than you know," he said. "I've had 3 new clients this month, all women who read about you and finally found the courage to leave." Laura felt a deep sense of purpose she had never experienced before. But success brought complications. One evening, as Laura was locking up the studio, a car pulled up. A woman in her 40s stepped out, well-dressed, with nervous energy. "Are you Laura?" she asked. Laura nodded. "I'm Vanessa, Roberto's ex-wife, from before you." Laura felt her stomach drop. She had known Roberto had been married before, but he had always dismissed it as a brief mistake in his youth, painting his ex-wife as unstable and vindictive. "I read about you in the paper," Vanessa continued, "about what he did to you and your daughter. I need you to know something. He did the same to me. Worse, actually. I was hospitalized twice. The second time I lost our baby. I was 5 months pregnant." Laura's hand flew to her mouth. "I tried to press charges, but back then, things were different. My own family told me to forgive him, that marriage was sacred. So I just ran, changed my name, moved across the country, started over. But I never forgot. And I never stopped feeling guilty that I didn't do more to warn others." The 2 women stood in the fading light, sharing stories that mirrored each other across decades. Vanessa had rebuilt her life, remarried a kind man, adopted 2 children, but the guilt had haunted her. "When I saw that you fought back, that you won, I felt like I could finally breathe," Vanessa said, tears streaming down her face. Laura hugged her, 2 strangers bound by shared trauma. "You survived. That's what mattered. You did what you needed to do." They exchanged numbers, promising to stay in touch. Vanessa became another unexpected friend, another thread in the tapestry of Laura's new life. Marina's daughter, little Sophia, was growing into a curious, fearless child. At 4 years old, she asked questions about everything. One day, while Laura was photographing her in the garden, Sophia looked up and asked, "Grandma, why don't I have another grandpa?" Marina, who was nearby, tensed. Laura knelt down to Sophia's level. "Some people aren't meant to be in our lives, sweetheart. But look at all the people who love you. Uncle Pedro's father comes to visit, right? And Mr. Jefferson from down the street always brings you books." Sophia seemed satisfied with this answer and ran off to chase butterflies. Jefferson, the former hospital security guard who had blocked Roberto that fateful night, had indeed become a fixture in their lives. He had retired and moved to their neighborhood by coincidence. When he recognized Laura at the local market, they had struck up a conversation. He now visited regularly, bringing books for Sophia and telling stories of his years working security. He had daughters of his own, grown now with their own families, but he enjoyed spending time with Sophia. "She reminds me of my youngest at that age," he told Marina once, full of questions and light. Pedro's career was flourishing as well. He had been offered a position at a prestigious academy, teaching advanced history courses. The pay was significantly better, which allowed them to move to a larger house with a yard where Sophia could play. The new neighborhood was quiet, filled with young families. Their next-door neighbors, Richard and Susan, had twins Sophia's age. The children became inseparable, and weekend barbecues became a regular occurrence. But the past had a way of resurfacing. One Saturday, as Pedro was grilling and the children played, a police officer named Detective Morrison arrived at their door. "I'm looking for Marina," he said, showing his badge. Marina's heart raced as she stepped forward. "I'm Marina." Morrison looked uncomfortable. "I'm investigating some financial crimes. Roberto's name came up. We found evidence that he had been running scams before he died, taking money from elderly people by posing as a contractor and never completing work. We're trying to track down victims for restitution. Did he ever mention anything like that?" Marina felt sick. Even in death, Roberto was causing harm. "No, I had no contact with him for years before he died. But I can tell you who might know something." She gave him Silvana's contact information, and Julio's as well. Morrison thanked her and left. That night, Marina couldn't sleep. Pedro held her as she cried angry tears. "Why can't he just stay buried?" she asked. "Why does he keep reaching out from the grave to hurt people?" The investigation eventually revealed that Roberto had scammed nearly 20 elderly people out of their savings in the last years of his life. The amounts ranged from a few thousand to over 50,000 in one case. An elderly man named Frank had given Roberto his entire retirement fund to renovate his kitchen. Roberto had demolished the old kitchen and disappeared. Frank had been living without a functional kitchen for 8 months before he died of a heart attack. His daughter, Christine, was one of the people Detective Morrison interviewed. Christine tracked down Marina through the investigation. She showed up at Marina's office, furious. "Your stepfather destroyed my father's last years," she spat. "My dad died eating canned soup cold because he had no stove, no sink. He was too proud to tell me what happened until it was too late." Marina felt the weight of Christine's pain. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "But he wasn't my stepfather when he did this. He was nothing to me. He had been out of my life for years. I wish I could undo what he did, but I can't." Christine stared at her. Then her anger seemed to deflate. I know it's not your fault. I just needed to yell at someone, and you're the closest thing to family he had left. Detective Morrison told me about what he did to you and your mother. I guess we're both his victims, in different ways." The two women sat in Marina's office, sharing coffee and stories of devastation. Before Christine left, she said something that stuck with Marina. "At least you got away while he was alive. My dad never got that chance." The scandal made local news. Several articles detailed Roberto's crimes, and each one mentioned his history of domestic abuse. Marina received calls from reporters, which she declined. But Laura agreed to one interview with Beatrice, the journalist who had featured her photography studio. Laura spoke carefully, focusing not on Roberto, but on the importance of recognizing warning signs and having support systems. "Abusers don't change," she said on camera. "They just find new victims. The best thing we can do is believe survivors and help them escape before it's too late." The interview went viral. Laura's studio was flooded with messages of support, but also with requests for help. Women from hundreds of miles away were asking how to leave, where to go, what to do. Laura felt overwhelmed. She called a meeting with Camila, Dr. Henrique, and a social worker named Patricia, who had reached out after seeing the interview. Patricia had experience running shelters and support networks. "We could create something," Patricia suggested. "A foundation to help women leave abusive situations, provide legal support, temporary housing, job training." Dr. Henrique offered to handle the legal setup pro bono. Camila connected them with healthcare workers who could provide medical support. Laura used a portion of the money from the house sale as seed funding. Marina contributed as well, and Pedro helped design educational materials. Within 6 months, they had established the New Beginnings Foundation. The foundation helped 15 women in its first year, providing everything from restraining orders to job interviews to therapy sessions. One of the women the foundation helped was a young mother named Rachel. She was 25, with 2 small children, and a husband who had put her in the hospital 3 times. Rachel's case was particularly difficult because her husband, Marcus, was a police officer, and she was terrified that no one would believe her. Patricia and Dr. Henrique worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, securing testimony from emergency room doctors who had treated Rachel, and ultimately getting Marcus arrested and charged. Rachel and her children stayed in a safe house for 3 months while the case proceeded. During that time, Laura photographed Rachel's journey. The first photos showed a woman who flinched at sudden sounds, who kept her eyes down, who seemed to fold in on herself. The later photos showed transformation, Rachel learning to look at the camera, to smile, to hold her children with confidence instead of fear. These photos became the centerpiece of the foundation's fundraising campaign. Marina was promoted again at work, this time to senior manager. Gloria called her into the office one day with an unexpected proposition. "I'm opening a second office in another region. I want you to run it." Marina was stunned. "That's a huge responsibility," she said. Gloria smiled. "You've handled huge responsibilities before. Running from an abuser, rebuilding your life, helping your mother do the same. Running an office will be easy compared to that." Marina accepted. The new position required some travel, which meant Pedro and Laura tag-teamed caring for Sofia. Pedro's father, a gentleman named Antonio who lived alone since his wife's death, offered to help as well. Antonio had become a beloved grandfather figure to Sofia. He taught her to plant vegetables in the garden and told her stories of history that even Pedro hadn't heard. "Your father was always too serious," Antonio told Sofia with a wink. "But you, little one, you know how to have fun." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work, family, the foundation, photography, teaching. The calendar filled with soccer games, school plays, foundation events, family dinners. Roberto's death became a more distant memory with each passing month. But then, 4 years after his death, Silvana called Laura. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice shaky. "I found boxes of Roberto's things in my attic. Papers, journals. Laura, he kept records of everything. Every person he scammed, every lie he told, every time he hit you. It's all written down, like he was proud of it." Laura felt cold. "Why are you telling me this?" Silvana was quiet for a moment. "Because in one of the journals he wrote about other women. Before you, before Vanessa. At least 3 others I could identify from the names. And Laura, one of them died. A woman named Teresa. He wrote that she fell down the stairs during an argument, hit her head. He called it an accident, but the way he described it, the way he wrote about feeling relieved she was gone, I think he pushed her." Laura immediately called Dr. Henrique, who contacted Detective Morrison. The journals were turned over to the police. An investigation was opened into Teresa's death, which had occurred 15 years earlier and been ruled accidental. Teresa's family, who had always suspected foul play, finally had evidence to support their instincts. Roberto couldn't be prosecuted since he was dead, but Teresa's daughter, a woman in her 30s named Melissa, got answers she had been seeking for over a decade. Melissa contacted Laura, wanting to meet the other women who had survived Roberto. A gathering was organized at Laura's studio. Vanessa flew in. Rachel came with Patricia. Silvana attended. carrying the weight of being related to a monster. Dr. Henrique facilitated the discussion, keeping it structured and safe. The women shared their stories, cried together, raged together, and ultimately found a strange sort of peace in the shared understanding that they had survived something that Teresa had not. "My mother was so vibrant," Melissa said, showing photos of Teresa. "She loved to dance, to sing, and he took that away. But knowing that you all got out, that you're thriving, it helps. It means he didn't win, not completely." The women formed a bond that day, staying in touch through calls and messages, supporting each other through difficult moments and celebrating victories. The foundation grew. 2 years after its founding, it had helped over 100 women and their children. Laura gave up her studio to work full-time running the foundation, though she still photographed every woman who came through, documenting their journeys. Marina's company began donating a portion of profits to the foundation. Pedro developed a curriculum about recognizing abuse that was adopted by several schools. Sophia grew into a bright, confident child. At 8 years old, she was reading at a high school level and writing her own stories. One evening, she asked Marina about the foundation. "Why did Grandma start helping people?" Marina chose her words carefully. "Because Grandma knows what it's like to need help and not have it, and she wants to make sure other people have what she didn't." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "When I grow up, I want to help people too." Marina hugged her daughter, feeling a surge of pride. But challenges remained. The foundation struggled with funding as needs grew. A major donor pulled out after a scandal unrelated to the foundation, but devastating to their finances. Laura, Camila, and Patricia brainstormed solutions. They organized a gala fundraiser, reaching out to everyone in their network. Marina's company sponsored tables. Pedro's academy contributed. Dr. Henrique convinced several lawyer friends to attend. Even Gloria flew in with several of her business contacts. The gala was held at an elegant hotel ballroom. Over 200 people attended. Laura gave a speech about the foundation's work, introducing Rachel, who shared her story publicly for the first time. Rachel's courage moved the room to tears. By the end of the night, they had raised enough to keep the foundation running for 2 more years and expand services to include job training and childcare. Jefferson, who had become a volunteer at the foundation teaching self-defense classes, attended the gala with his daughters. He had been teaching the women practical skills for protecting themselves, but also helping them rebuild confidence. "The physical techniques matter," he told Laura once, "but what matters more is teaching them they have the right to defend themselves, that their safety matters." His classes were always full, and many women credited him with helping them feel strong again. Antonio, Pedro's father, had a health scare when Sophia was 9, a minor heart attack that nonetheless terrified the family. During his recovery, Sophia visited him daily, reading to him and keeping him company. "You remind me of your grandmother," Antonio told her. "That same fierce heart." He recovered fully, but the incident reminded everyone how precious time was. Family dinners became more frequent, gatherings more intentional. Marina faced her own challenge when Gloria announced she was retiring and selling the company. The buyer, a large corporation, planned to restructure. Marina was offered a position with the new company, but it would mean relocating and less autonomy. She struggled with the decision. The money was excellent, but it would take her away from her family, from the foundation work, from the life she had built. Pedro and Laura both told her the same thing when she asked for advice. "Do what makes you happy," Pedro said. "We'll figure out the rest." Laura added, "You've spent enough of your life doing things because you had to. Now you get to choose." Marina declined the corporate position and instead started her own consulting firm, taking several of Gloria's former clients with her blessing. The first year was lean, but she made it work. By the second year, she was profitable and growing. The foundation celebrated its 5th anniversary with a reunion of every woman they had helped. Some had moved away, some had rebuilt their lives in the same area, but nearly all of them came. The event was held in a park on a beautiful spring afternoon. Children played on the grass while women shared food and stories and laughter. Laura photographed everything, capturing moments of joy that once seemed impossible. Rachel had become a paralegal working with Dr. Henrique, helping other abuse survivors navigate the legal system. She had met someone, a kind man named Thomas, who adored her children. They were planning to marry in the fall. Vanessa had written a book about her experiences, dedicating it to Laura and all the women who survived. Patricia had been hired by the regional government to develop abuse prevention programs for schools. Detective Morrison attended the reunion, not in an official capacity, but as a friend. He had become invested in the foundation's work after the Roberto investigation, occasionally volunteering his time to help with safety planning for particularly dangerous cases. "You've all built something remarkable," he told Laura. "You turned your worst experiences into help for others. That takes a special kind of strength." Sophia, at 10 years old, was old enough to understand more about her family's history. Marina sat her down one evening and told her an age-appropriate version of what had happened with Roberto. "Why didn't you just call the police?" Sophia asked. With the straightforward logic of a child, Marina explained how complicated abuse situations were, how fear worked, how systems sometimes failed. Sophia listened intently, then hugged her mother tight. "I'm glad you got away," she said simply. School presented new challenges for Sophia. She was exceptionally bright, which sometimes made her a target for bullying. Kids called her a know-it-all, excluded her from groups. Marina and Pedro worked with the school, but progress was slow. It was Jefferson who finally helped Sophia develop strategies for handling the social dynamics. "Smart kids always have it tough," he told her. "But you know what? Those bullies will be working for people like you someday." Sophia laughed, and though the bullying continued, she handled it with more confidence. Laura's photography evolved. She began a project documenting not just abuse survivors, but all kinds of transformations. People recovering from addiction, leaving prison, starting over after loss. Her work was featured in galleries, published in magazines. A museum contacted her about a permanent exhibition. The shy librarian, who had been told for years that she had no talents, was now recognized as an artist of significance. Pedro published his first book, a comprehensive look at how societies throughout history had handled domestic violence. It became required reading in several university courses. He was invited to speak at conferences and symposia. The boy who had quietly taught history had become a voice for change. Antonio attended every speaking engagement he could, sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. Marina's consulting firm grew to 15 employees. She hired several women from the foundation, believing in second chances and fresh starts. Her management style was compassionate but demanding, expecting excellence while understanding that everyone had struggles. The firm developed a reputation for both quality work and positive culture. Competitors tried to recruit her staff, but loyalty ran deep. One of her employees, a woman named Denise who had escaped an abusive marriage with the foundation's help, told her, "You gave me a chance when I had nothing. I'll never forget that." The foundation expanded beyond local services. Laura, Patricia, and Camilla developed a model that could be replicated in other communities. They published guides, offered training, consulted with groups trying to start similar programs. Within 3 years, 17 communities had established foundations based on their model. Each one saved lives. On what would have been Roberto's 70th birthday, Laura did something unexpected. She wrote him a letter, not to send, but to burn in a private ceremony. In it, she detailed everything he had taken from her, everything he had destroyed, but also everything she had built from the ashes. "You tried to make me nothing," she wrote. "You failed. I became something you could never understand. I became free." She burned the letter in her backyard fire pit, with Marina, Pedro, Sophia, Camilla, and Jefferson watching. The smoke carried her words away, and with it, the last hold Roberto's memory had on her heart. Marina found the ceremony powerful. She wrote her own letter, shorter, but no less meaningful. "You taught me what kind of person I never wanted to be," she wrote. "Thank you for that lesson, even though the cost was high." She burned it alongside her mother's, and they watched the flames together. Sophia, observing this, asked if she could write a letter too. "But I never met him," she said. Marina helped her understand that sometimes we carry pain from things that happened before we were born. That generational trauma was real, but so was generational healing. Sophia wrote, "I'm glad I never met you. I'm glad my mom got away. I'm glad my grandma is strong. Her letter joined the flames. The foundation faced a crisis in its 7th year when a woman named Helen, who they had helped escape her husband, was murdered by him despite a restraining order. The news devastated everyone involved. Helen had 2 children, now orphans, being cared for by Helen's sister. The foundation arranged to pay for therapy for the children and provide financial support. But the grief was overwhelming. Laura questioned everything. "What's the point if we can't keep them safe?" she asked Dr. Henrique. He was gentle but firm. "The point is that you try. Helen had 3 years of freedom because of you. Her children got to see their mother happy for 3 years. That matters. And yes, the system failed her. The police didn't take the restraining order seriously enough. The courts didn't act fast enough. But that's not on you. That's on a broken system. Your job is to keep fighting to fix it." The foundation channeled its grief into action, launching a campaign for stronger enforcement of restraining orders and better police training on domestic violence. Patricia testified before the regional assembly. Marina used her business connections to organize meetings with policymakers. Rachel shared her story of being married to a police officer who abused her, highlighting how the system protected abusers within its ranks. Helen's sister spoke about her loss. Changes were slow, but they came. New protocols, better training, harsher penalties for violations. Sophia entered high school as an exceptionally young student, having skipped 2 grades. At 12, she was smaller than her classmates and socially awkward, but intellectually, she belonged. Pedro worried about her constantly. Marina reminded him that they needed to trust Sophia's resilience, just as Laura had trusted Marina's. "She's stronger than she looks," Marina said. "She comes from a line of survivors." Indeed, Sophia proved them right. She joined the debate team and excelled, her quick mind and preparation making her formidable. She made friends with other academic kids, forming a tight circle of similarly driven students. When a senior boy tried to pressure her into a date, she reported him immediately and without fear. The school took action, and Sophia moved on without looking back. "I know my worth," she told Marina when asked how she handled it so well. "You and Grandma taught me that." Laura's museum exhibition opened to critical acclaim. The collection included photographs spanning her entire career, from her first tentative portraits of Rachel to recent work documenting social movements and community activism. The opening night was attended by hundreds. All the women from the foundation came, dressed up and proud. Vanessa flew in again. Teresa's daughter Melissa attended with her own children. The gallery walls told stories of pain transformed into power. A young woman approached Laura during the opening. "I'm a photographer too," she said nervously, "and I'm in an abusive relationship. I've been planning to leave, but I'm scared. Seeing your work, knowing your story, it makes me believe I can do it." Laura spent an hour talking with her, connecting her with Patricia, making sure she had resources and a safety plan. The woman left with hope in her eyes. 2 months later, she sent Laura a photo. She had left, was safe, and had taken her first photograph of her new life. "Thank you for showing me it was possible," she wrote. Pedro's father, Antonio, passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 79. The family mourned deeply. Sophia, now 13, gave a eulogy at the funeral that moved everyone to tears. She spoke about how Antonio had taught her to find joy in small things, to appreciate history and nature, to be kind. "He showed me that grandfathers should be gentle and loving," she said. "He set the bar high." Marina held Pedro as he cried, knowing Sophia's words about what grandfathers should be were a quiet acknowledgement of what Roberto had failed to be. The foundation received a major grant from a national organization focused on domestic violence prevention. The funding allowed them to hire more staff, expand services, and open a second location. Laura hired a director to handle day-to-day operations so she could focus on the bigger picture and her photography. The new director, a woman named Keisha who had survived trafficking and built a career in social work, brought fresh energy and ideas. Marina's firm landed a contract with an international corporation, the biggest deal of her career. The work was demanding, but exhilarating. She hired more staff to handle the increased workload, continuing her practice of giving opportunities to women rebuilding their lives. Her company culture remained strong even as it grew. Employees regularly volunteered with the foundation, creating a pipeline of support and opportunity. Sophia graduated high school at 15 and was accepted to a prestigious university with a full scholarship. The family celebrated with a huge party. All the extended family came, all the foundation people, all the friends they had accumulated over the years. Jefferson gave a toast about watching Sophia grow from a curious toddler to a brilliant young woman. Camilla presented her with a photo album Laura had secretly compiled, documenting Sophia's life from birth to graduation. Every page was filled with love and joy and achievement. At university, Sophia thrived. She studied social justice and planned to become a lawyer focused on family law. "I want to be like Dr. Henrique," she told her mother during winter break. "I want to help families escape abuse and rebuild their lives." Marina felt a complex mix of emotions, pride that her daughter wanted to help others, but also sadness that Roberto's legacy had shaped her path. Pedro reminded her that it wasn't just Roberto's legacy. "She's also following Laura's example of turning pain into purpose," he said. "That's a choice Sophia is making, not something imposed on her." The foundation celebrated its 10th anniversary with a gala even larger than the first. They had helped over 500 women and 1,000 children. The statistics were impressive, but what mattered more were the individual stories. Rachel, now a senior paralegal with plans to attend law school. Denise, who had risen to senior consultant at Marina's firm. Helen's children, now teenagers, doing well in school and therapy. Countless others, rebuilding their lives one day at a time. Laura was invited to speak at a national conference on domestic violence. She stood before an audience of policymakers, advocates, and survivors. She told her story without flinching, including the parts that were hard to say. She talked about the shame of staying, the terror of leaving, the difficulty of rebuilding, but she also talked about the strength she found, the community that supported her, the life that bloomed after escape. "Roberto tried to destroy me," she concluded. "But destruction can be a form of creation. He destroyed who I was, and from those ruins, I built who I chose to be. That's the power every survivor has, if we support them through it." The speech was recorded and went viral online. Millions of views, thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories or pledging to help someone they knew. The foundation's website crashed from the traffic. Donations poured in. Laura was suddenly a public figure, which felt uncomfortable, but she used the platform to advocate for stronger laws, better funding for shelters, more comprehensive education about abuse. Marina watched her mother transform into an advocate and felt immense pride. The shy woman who once couldn't imagine working outside the home was now speaking to national audiences and influencing policy. The journey from that hospital room where Laura had emptied the bank accounts to this stage where she commanded attention and respect was remarkable. Roberto had been dead for over a decade now, but his impact lingered in unexpected ways. The women he had scammed still felt the financial burden. Teresa's family still grieved. Vanessa still had nightmares sometimes. Laura still flinched at sudden loud noises. Marina still struggled with trust in ways that affected her relationships. The scars were real and permanent, but so was the healing, so was the growth, so were the lives saved and changed and improved because of the foundation. So was the family Marina and Laura and Pedro and Sophia had built, grounded in love and honesty and mutual support. So was the work they did every day to make the world slightly better than they found it. Sophia came home from university for the summer and announced she had started a campus organization focused on dating violence prevention. "A lot of college students don't recognize the warning signs," she explained. "I'm teaching workshops on what healthy relationships look like." She had developed curriculum based on research and the foundation's resources. Already, 3 other universities had reached out wanting to replicate the program. Laura photographed Sophia teaching one of her workshops. The image captured Sophia mid-gesture, passionate and articulate, with students listening intently. It was one of Laura's favorite photographs, representing the full circle of their journey, from victim to survivor to advocate to educator, spanning 3 generations. Roberto's attempt to crush them had instead created a legacy of resilience. The years continued to pass, marked by milestones and ordinary days alike. Marina's firm celebrated its 15th year in business. The foundation opened a third location. Pedro published his second book. Sophia graduated university with highest honors and was accepted to law school. Laura's work was featured in an international photography journal. They gathered often. This family built from the ashes of trauma. Around dinner tables and at birthday parties and holiday celebrations, they shared meals and stories and laughter. They supported each other through challenges and celebrated victories together. And they never forgot where they had come from, but they also never let it define where they were going. Roberto remained dead and buried, his name mentioned only when necessary for legal documents or foundation origin stories. He had no monument, no legacy beyond the damage he caused and the strength others found in surviving him. His grave was untended, visited by no one. Even Silvana stopped going after the first few years. Meanwhile, Laura's studio walls filled with photographs of joy. Marina's office walls displayed awards and achievements. Pedro's home office housed his published works. Sophia's dorm room had photos of her family, reminders of the love that had raised her. Their walls told a different story than the one Roberto had tried to write.